Tonight we will be working on this 2007 BMW 328 Xdrive. The vehicle belongs to a good friend of mine. He has been working on the issue that he is feeling for a while now. He's done a lot of work trying to rectify the problem that he's feeling. So the main issue and concern is that while driving, particularly on slow takeoff or coming to a stop, and occasionally while just regularly cruising, you get a fish bite misfire feeling, and it'll cause like a thumping, kind of just a hesitation. And again, it's while taking off, it'll start to kind of just thump and hesitate, and it feels just like a misfire. As far as any trouble codes, especially related to misfires in the DME, there are no misfire codes, no check engine light. As far as the work that he has done, he has told me coils had been done, but a while ago. So I'm not sure if they're beginning to fail now. But also with that, he believes that it's something in the driveline. I believe one of the first things he did was he took down the valve body, did some work on that, reinstalled it, made no change. Obviously, he's concentrated on the transmission, which at that point he'd also obviously have done filter and flush, fluid, all of that. Also, I know that there is a bulletin targeting this type of specific vehicle with the driveline setup for a failing torque converter. I don't have the bulletin on hand, but there is a known issue where the torque converter internally starts to fail and causes a jolting feeling like that. He had replaced the torque converter as well and made no change. And also, believe it or not, a completely different transmission, and it still runs and drives the same way. So I told him to leave it with me. I'll try to scope as much things that I can as far as what I could try to monitor to see where this jolting kind of fish bite feeling misfire is coming from. So as far as what I am wanting to look at is, I'm already set up there with the scope, obviously. I want to look at all the ignition coils. This is basically a dump coil setup, kind of like a 2-wire coil, but the Beamers do have 3 wires on them, but they are still the quote-unquote dump coil, meaning there is no driver in the coil, it's all on the computer, so you can tap in and look at secondary ignition waveform. So I am tapped into all 6 coils, and then I'm also tapped into the crankshaft sensor to also see if I can tie a misfire drop in crankshaft speed while monitoring all the coils to try and correlate that if it is truly an ignition breakdown, like a random ignition breakdown, to kind of look and see which one it is, if it is one, and not chase anything else. I want to eliminate a misfire because this very easily can be misconstrued, and someone can sell you a whole, 6-coil plug tune-up type deal and cost a lot of money and still have the same issues. So I want to eliminate that by monitoring it. The other thing that I want to monitor is I've got my chassis on 2 spots of the driveline, one by an engine mount, one on the transfer case, because when this happens, you can feel it, clearly feel it. It creates a thumping noise. So I want to try to capture the movement or vibration, knocking, whatever you want to call it, when this happens, simultaneously while monitoring all that, see if we can tie anything and all things together to try to make a a diagnosis of what is creating the physical symptom we are feeling. Just a quick side note. Again, as I said, these coils are of the dumb coil style, which create high voltage. So in order to not damage your scope, you have to use attenuators. So make sure if you are monitoring secondary ignition to use attenuators on certain scopes that can't handle high voltage. So that is my setup. Channel 1 is my crank sensor. Then I've got 6 coils, and then I've got my adapter for the chassis ears. And I think for me, this is the important one. I want to be able to capture the physical symptom occurring, so then after that, we can correlate any of the other things going on. At this point, I'm not tying any particular channel to a particular cylinder. I don't know which ones I'm tapped into. I just got all 6 on the DME connector. But if something drops out or looks funky on the coil, then I'll look and see which one's tapped into, whichever one's showing up bad. But that's my channel setup and connection. And next I'll get you in the car for a test drive. Hopefully we can get it on camera and I can show you what it's doing. So before we get going on the test drive, I wanted to show you the trouble codes for anything related. In the DME, does have 2 trouble codes, but nothing basically misfire related. So that's it's got an O2 code and just power management. And in the transmission, there's actually looks like a voltage code, but nothing related to what we are trying to chase. Okay, so I'm at a standstill and have the scope running, and we'll see. And I just need to let off and start to accelerate, and it should do it. Don't know if you could pick it up audibly. It's be probably very difficult, but it did do it there. And so what I will do to try and make it easier to find is there's a filter, and you can see clearly there the jolt that is being that higher amplitude is when the vehicle was jolting and shaking almost like a misfire. So with that captured, again, like I said, it doesn't take much. It's just as soon as you start to roll off and begin to accelerate, it starts to jolt on me. So, and it'll do that continuously while driving and cruising sometimes. And when coming to a stop, it'll do it sometimes. So I'll put the camera down. I'll try to capture some more. That one is definitely good enough, but and then we'll take a look at the waveforms. All right, so this is the one of the scope captures that I took while test driving, and the main one that I would like to concentrate on, or the one that is going to be the purple one, which is the chassis ear microphones, and that's the one that's going to pick up an event and when it happened. There, as you can see, there's an event there, and a few more. And just to show you, so there's the one, there's another, and then there's that one. So on this one, I've got 2 rulers set in place from kind of basically beginning to end of that event, and based off of that event occurring in time, we can then go and try to look up at ignition and see what that looks like. Now, one key note for me to explain, the the quality, or basically the sample rate and the time base, is very horrible for detail. Reason why I was running all 8 channels, and then so the rate just goes down for trying to get a good detail. Now, because of that, and again the time base, the ignition traces will sort of give off a funky looking picture, as if there is something wrong, or possible lean looking type of picture, or just not a great way to look for detail in ignition. Now, what I look at when I do these BMWs, and I do when I do multiple ones and with a lot of time on the screen, the areas for me to concentrate on to be able to pick up basically bad coils or ignition issues is this basically spacing here, your burn time, I guess, for burn line. Obviously, the burn line is appearing to be all wacky, but the burn time, and then this oscillation at the end of the burn time, to see that basically oscillating and bunched up and present when these coils fail. Either the time will be different than some of the good ones, or the oscillating trace would almost look kind of ramping and smoothed out as opposed to oscillating. So that is what I tend to look at for misfiring coils on these BMWs. So we'll scroll through. This is the beginning of the event, and we'll scroll, look at the ignition traces during that time that the event happened, to see if there's an oddball man out as far as the burn time or oscillations. And all are still looking about the same. Oscillations are present. Distance is still there, and now we are at the end. Again, trust me on this, the traces will look weird or funky, but there are no true ignition misfires, even though this trace looks this way. So towards the end of that, none of those ignition events collapsed or look different than the others, and is not giving me a reason for it to be a cause of ignition. And just even panned out this way, you can tell that all of those ignition traces look about the same as far as in the area. And I keep reiterating this because I know some of those do look different and might raise some concern, but again, it's due to the time base and the sample rate. And now quickly, if we move over here to this first event and look at basically the same thing, we want to see the ignition traces all be there similarly. Which there again, they all are present and are there, have oscillations, and don't appear to have one oddball guy or multiple oddball guys dropping out when we captured this event. So because of verifying this and wanting to watch ignition and not seeing one that I know is displaying as faulty, then I'm ruling out coils or ignition spark, anything towards the engine side over there. And being that we know it's not going to be a torque converter or also a complete transmission, now we can look to other potential driveline concerns or issues that could be causing the symptom that we are experiencing. Okay, so I wanted to bring up this last capture and kind of go through and explain what I've got going on here. I will tell you this is a different day and time and capture, all due to the settings that I was explaining before. I couldn't get the correct information that I wanted when I was running all 8 channels, so I did have to, at a different time, run it again, set it all up, and take this capture. But I wanted to do it to be able to drive home a point and to be able to present this well as far as what I'm trying to explain or why I did what I did. So what I could not get to work with the previous captures due to the sampling rate is my math channel to come up in a usable way. The reason why I wanted to create a math channel off the crankshaft sensor was because I wanted to see if there was a drop in speed in the crankshaft, which would indicate a misfire. And tying that in afterwards with an ignition can then lead you to a specific cylinder. But I was running this to verify if I couldn't see it exactly with an ignition trace, then I would look for any drops in the crankshaft speed when I would have an event happen being captured with the microphones. And so what I have pulled up here is a whole capture, and then this other blue is the math channel, and you can literally see when I was beginning to accelerate and then slow, accelerate, so on and so forth, and then kind of cruise. And this is when I captured event as far as the shaking or thumping. To show you an area of what looking for, not necessarily bad, but what this looks like in a good state, is I'm looking for basically 6 acceleration points in between ignition cycles. So I'm actually synced on the red channel with cylinder 1, and then each time a cylinder fires, the crankshaft speed will increase. It'll speed up, which then on the math channel will show an upward travel. When it goes down, that means the crankshaft speed is slowing down, and then rise back up when it speeds up again, when there is proper ignition, combustion, and energy and power is created, which will speed up the crankshaft. So then that's why we see upward travel. If you have a misfire, you'll see it really drop off, and it's very noticeable. So now that I have the correct sampling and good capture, this is a good stable point where it was, I think, just cruising, and I can show you what good looks like. Now these points that drop off is the segment on the tooth wheel where there's a missing tooth, but you have to kind of use your imagination and look at the point here and here. If you tie those together, it's still an upward travel, meaning if you pretend that that line's not dropping off, connect those points, that is an upward travel. And so if I put my markers and split this in 6 segments, you've got an upward travel, another one, another one, another one, another one, and another one. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 upward travels. Now to better explain this, I've taken a screenshot, and it helps just to visualize it for those that are not too familiar with it. This is the firing order. I'm synced off of number 1 back to 1, so that's 720. And I generalized it, so you break apart your combustion events per firing order, and then you kind of just generalize the upward travel of the crankshaft speed. Each time combustion happens, the crankshaft speeds up. So what we want to look for, if one of these did not contribute to speeding up the crankshaft, you will not see this upward travel on the mat channel. And so then, since we know what we are looking for, that this is known good combustion, no misfires, nothing funky going on, we'll tie this into the point where the other channel captured an event and see if we have any drop-offs. And so we'll pick somewhere here, and we can, this is the start of the event that was captured, so we can actually use that point and get our rulers. And here, when we captured movement on the microphone or an event, we can now look at all our cylinders and see if we have upward travel. And we go here, up, here, up, here, up, here, up, here, up, and here, up. All of those contributed. Engine was still spinning and evenly firing cylinders as far as power and force to the crankshaft. None of them dropped off when we had this event happen. So again, I know with this, along with the other data, that this event is not being created by a misfire. This helps also reiterate that even though those ignition captures did not look what you would consider ideal, but this is a second form of confirming that there was no ignition misfire, because there was complete contribution of all 6 cylinders and it never dropped out when we know we physically had an event occurring. And so this helps verify that it's not going to be ignition related. So based off of going over the scope data and kind of making the decisions, I decided to try to figure out best way to make a change to see if a change does occur. And there's a couple of ways I can do it. Basically trying to eliminate the transfer case actuation or control or module itself to again to see if the issue stops. The simplest way was to unplug the actuator, which is underneath on the transfer case, which will be this connector here. So, or I could get to the module, which is inside the car, but it's underneath the carpet, underneath the by the passenger seat, so it's a little bit more difficult to get to. And just looking at this, I simply then at that point decided to see if I can eliminate the power supply to the module, which then would take out the either the whole module or the control of the motor itself. But all these are dependent upon which one would be easiest, because I simply just don't want to invest too much time on taking seat out or putting this back on the rack and getting underneath here. Or the problem with trying to simply quote unquote pull a fuse is these junction boxes most of the time don't have fuse labeling paper that came with the car when new, and there's a million fuses on this and they're not labeled or numbered, so sometimes it's harder to simply quote unquote pull a fuse. But I think I am going to go with check to see if the vehicle has the diagram, and if so, I am going to pull there's a 30 amp and a 5 amp. The 5 amps is going to be for controlling or powering up like the logic and stuff for the module. This one, being that it's the higher amps, I'm going to assume that it's for supplying power to the motor to actuate it. So I'm going to go with this fuse to keep the module at least awake online. Okay, so we open the glove box, pull that panel down. Obviously you can see the fuse at the junction box. And luckily, there is the fuse diagram layout. So this is the route I'll go. I'll find which fuse it is, pull it out, and then go from there. Okay, so I've actually found a smooth road to be able to show you in greater detail. So I will do just that slight takeoff, the rolling with slightly engaging throttle to where the vehicle, the transmission, and I guess transfer case will begin to accelerate. Here, I'll start over just to show you in the same way. So just start accelerating, off throttle, up to that point with the same takeoff. And look at that purple. There is no jagged spikes and stuff like that, obviously, because the transfer case motor fuse is out. It is not attempting to control transfer case, which looks like that is where the jolting is coming from. So I'll do another quick roll takeoff. Up to that point, we would have felt something already accelerating. I actually shifted a gear there. And we'll stop. Go back, and again, clear, smooth, no jagged jolt. So just for maybe a better comparison, I'm going to put the fuse back in on this smooth road and see if we could see the jolts clearer without road noise or bumps being captured there. Okay, so the fuse is back in on that row of 3. Green 30 amps to the right. I will key it up. Okay, and let me see if the okay, so no 4x4 messages. Let's clear that out, and we'll do the slight takeoff. Okay. There. Okay. Stop that. And there's the jolt and a little bit of vibration. So let's see. There you go, clear as day. The jolt comes back with the fuse in. And yeah, transfer case causing the jolting. A little bit more there. Not smooth like we just did, the same road. So trying to avoid the capturing bumps in the road. All it takes to create it is just slight takeoff. On its own, it'll start to jolt. And again, fuse in, fuse out. One shows one way, the other shows other. So clearly transfer case related and not ignition or transmission or anything else. So I wanted to just kind of present some of the bulletins that are out there related to the symptom that we are feeling, the misfire-like symptom. So this one is the SIB 240413. The title of it is for this specific trans, the 6L45, and it is for a shutter vibration issue while driving, which again, this one basically boils down when you go through the steps to a torque converter issue, and ultimately it tells you to replace it if nothing else is found. This bulletin here I actually ended up finding after figuring out what's wrong with this vehicle. So this one is out there, and this one is 270415, shutter from Driveline vehicles with Xdrive. So again, pertains to what we do have here. And one thing to keep in mind, there are different versions of the transfer cases. So I'm not sure if any of these other models have the same ATC transfer case or the newer version of it, but it looks like this pertains to just specific diagnosis of transfer case issues regardless of version. And basically, ultimately, on this is to it describes to go in the parking lot and raise the RPM to 2500 with the brake pedal held firmly and in drive. And if you feel a shutter shake, then it's going to be engine related. If you don't, then it tells you to let off the brake soft and start to roll off. And if you experience shudder and stuff, it's going to be from transfer case clutch wear issues, they say. So this is one bulletin of how to check and stuff for that symptom. Another bulletin to check and spec for that same symptom. And I believe there's one more bulletin related to this. I actually even wanted to bring up this bulletin that's related to the E90 with the N52, where basically there are misfires that are not captured by the OEM scanner, basically, and it tells you to surprisingly use an aftermarket OBD scanner, code reader type style that is able to capture misfires. So this is another bulletin related to the symptom feeling that we are having. So I guess in closing, I wanted to just make a few statements. Again, this situation it starts off as a symptom-based issue. You clearly, while driving, can feel the vehicle acting up. It shakes or shudders and knocks and hiccups, just like a misfire would feel like. For me, I've not had to break one of these situations down to the point of trying to eliminate which possibility it could be. Obviously, check your basics. Start, from engine mounts and training mounts, all that. But it is a hard one. If you go by how it feels and it's just like a misfire, you can, just simply by gut feeling, throw all coils and plugs and assume that it's a misfire thing that's going on, and you can chase your tail on that for a long time and waste a lot of money. Next, if you start to move on to, say, you find that torque converter bulletin, or I think there are other non-OEM informations that relate to, there are, I think, sticking spool valves in the valve body on this GM tranny on these Xdrive vehicles. You can get caught up in trying to chase the situation there as well because of some possible known issues with torque converter or tranny issues. And then again, if you find and go through trying to diagnose it by being the transfer case, I guess it is probably one of the easiest things to perform by either unplugging it or removing power supply like I did, to eliminate the possibility of it being the transfer case. You can have a vehicle that's a torque converter being the problem. You can unplug the transfer case and problem still be there. And so then now you have to figure out whether it is going to be torque converter or tranny related, or if it's going to be one of those misfire issues that isn't logged on the DME as far as a hard fault, but could be seen, I guess, with an aftermarket scanner as counting up in the misfire counter of an OBD code reader style scanner. So you can definitely, certainly chase your tail with many, many things. I guess that's why I wanted to go about it the way that I did. I wanted to monitor all the coils to see if they drop out or have a misfire looking type of coil faulted, and then monitoring the crank sensor to see if that drops out as well when I think I see a misfire on one of the coils. But the key here is to be able to tie all the data that I'm capturing with the microphone or chassis ear to capturing that shudder and that shake. Because once you capture that on the screen, you can tie everything else to that exact time and moment and see if other things cause that. Being that nothing else seemed to act up or drop out or show misfire, when we captured the shudder, we eliminate the whole big portion of, what it's not going to be. And then so that is what led me then to believe it is driveline. And then at that point, the simplest thing was to just eliminate the transfer case. Being that we have done transmission stuff already. So my friend will be happy. We will get this rectified for sure physically. I have helped him a little bit with this, with the tranny and torque converter. Just easier here on the lift instead of him doing it on his own. So I'm sure he's going to go forward with fixing it one way or the other. I believe we'll probably, just for starters, I'm sure we'll take the actuator motor off and make sure the gear's not messed up. That's a very common thing, but that'll log a fault right away because the gear won't be able to spin when it wears out or breaks inside the actuator. I believe this is going to be internal to the transfer case. Not sure if we'll open it up or anything. I'm sure we'll probably just remove and replace it with a different one and kind of go from there. So I hope this helps you guys out with trying to break down this. Seems to be kind of like a elusive fake misfire feeling, get you in trouble with throwing parts at it through driveline or engine stuff. So hope all the bulletins help out. There are multiple situations that can cause this symptom, and this is hopefully a way to try to break that down and help you guys make a better call on one of these Xdrive N52 engine vehicles. So thank you for watching and coming along, and that's all for this one.